Sitting here in the front of the house with my new toy. So hopefully this will be pretty clear. The sound should be clear because I have a remote microphone now. And what I want to talk about today is the history of California. I started off trying to make a movie about the Stearns Wharf here in Santa Barbara. I want to give a quick analysis of California history because it's really rich. So we'd like to start with 1522 Cortez, the first Spanish explorer that made it all the way to Baja California. Then in 1542, Cabrillo got all the way up to the Channel Islands and the Santa Barbara area. Well, this area wasn't developed for quite a while, even though they knew about it. The missions were established between 1769 and 1833. Stern came to Santa Barbara and opened a lumber yard down there on State Street where the wharf is. And since he had his lumber yard, he determined that he needed a way of unlanding. He needed a way to load and unload lumber. So he thought it'd be an ideal situation to build a wharf. And it's been there for all these years. It's a couple hundred years old. It's the oldest wooden wharf in California. And so it's very significant and it's very busy. But let's go back to California history. Turns out California history is tied very much so with Texas history. Texas won its freedom from Mexico in 1836. And in 1845, Texas joined the Union. Well, this caused Mexico to really be upset. And they were threatening war with the United States because they felt the United States was stealing Texas, which still belonged to Mexico, they thought. So this became a situation where the United States government was concerned that there was going to be a war with Mexico. So they sent some troops out to California to protect our interest. And in 1848, there was an incident up in Monterey at the Presidio where the American troops took over the Presidio and defeated the Mexican army. Well, this led to Americans being in California and pretty well taking the state. What state there was in 1848. But during that time, they hit gold. And in 1849, people come rushing into California, United States, and they were all after the gold. So it was a concern that Mexico and the United States would go to war. But it turns out in 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe gave the United States all of the land, including Arizona, New Mexico, and California, in one sweep and allowed it to be part of the United States. Well, there's still one issue. Spain still claimed California, or Spain still claimed the area. And believe it or not, Spain did not give their liquidation of their claim on California in the western area until 1898, when they had the Spanish-American War led by Teddy Roosevelt. And this leads us up to why California is part of the Union and some of the history. Stearns Wharf has been there for a long time, and it caused me to kind of want to unravel the story as to what it was like a little bit. What I'm going to do is probably Before Stearns Wharf, they could only land boats at low tide, then they would still be in the water. There are 21 missions in California, and Santa Barbara is called the Queen of the Missions. This is the Santa Barbara mission, and it's very significant because it's part of Santa Barbara's history, and it's been established since 1778, and it's called the Queen of the Missions. There are approximately 21 missions in California, and the Padres from Spain marched about 25 to 30 miles a day, as far as they could go on their horse or donkey, and set up these missions all the way from San Diego to San Francisco. I decided it might be worthwhile to try to climb up to a better vantage point so we could see how the mission was when the ships were coming in. Also, you'll notice that the tile are not tile, but the rocks are native and were quarried right out of Santa Barbara's ground. There's tons and tons of boulders around here. And if you look at the texture of these are not tile from the factory. They're tile that's been made by the probably the Indians of rock that was actually found in the area. There's lots of rock and a lot of building materials. I would say the mission is built out of really good stuff. Here's a sign telling how far the missions are apart. As I mentioned, they're about 30 miles apart, and that's about as far as you can walk on your horse during a day. So the Padres established these missions, established between 1769 and 1833. All the missions were established along the Santa Barbara area. The fountain's been there forever. It's a beautiful fountain. No fish in it or anything. It's just pretty clear water. And here's an vantage point where we're up here trying to take a look to see if we can see the ships coming in. The mission is quite pretty, quite old, but well maintained. And it has visitors hours, and it's probably worthwhile if you've never seen it to go there and visit it, because it is a quaint, beautiful place to be, and it has a lot of historical value that you might enjoy. As we get to our vantage point here, there's a nice little table, so we'll sit down and take a look out the ocean.
Yeah, it's very sweet.
And see if we got any ships coming. Because remember, in the old days, in order to unload a ship, we had to wait for either low tide or high tide or something, and we'd actually unload in the water. But now we got Stearns Wharf. You can bring the ship alongside the wharf and unload it very successfully. So we look out there. I don't see no ships today. Oh, keep looking. Maybe there'll be one tomorrow.
I don't see any ships today.
This picture will give you some idea of what the coastline was like before Stearns Wharf. They were unloading the boats in the water, and it was really a challenge. As you can see from the picture of the ship and the people unloading the stuff right there in the water, and that's the way it was before Stearns Wharf. Stearns Wharf today is 152 years old, and it's the oldest wooden pier in California. I was very fortunate that my stepson, David Larrabee, was able to use his drone and capture these fantastic aerial pictures of Stearns Wharf. I hope you enjoy the video. There are currently 17 businesses on the wharf, including 3 restaurants, a shellfish market, a bait tackle shop, a tourist oriental shop, and the Channel Island Exhibit Hall, a marine museum. The wharf today, the wharf today continues to be a favorite spot for the tourists to come and enjoy the Santa Barbara area. Once you're out there on the wharf, you've got a good view of the harbor as well as looking back at the city. Plus, occasionally, Santa Barbara is a host to ocean-going vessels such as cruise ships. Approximately about every 2 or 3 months, a cruise ship comes into Santa Barbara, and they cannot actually dock here, but they dock offshore and they have a small boat that brings the people ashore, and they enjoy the hospitality of Santa Barbara. And Santa Barbara is very glad to have the cruise ships because it's added to our tourist traffic.
The cars are able to drive all the way out on the wharf, and you can hear them bumping along. This little building here is where they have live lobsters. They're local lobsters and used to be able to see them through the window, but now today it's too dark and I couldn't really quite see them. But in that little window there are tons of live lobsters that you could have a live lobster meal. This is a place where they serve them right here. As you can see the sign, I think it says something about lobsters. The pier is a place where people like to come and walk and get out. And beautiful day, it's clear. So we took a little walk along the pier. Also from the pier, you could take a look at the ocean and look back towards the harbor, and you'll see some beautiful boats. This is telling you about some of the sea life in the area. The channel is full of sea life. The pier has been there for a long time, as you might guess, and one of its enemies is fire. Also, it has had trouble back in, I think, the early 1800s. A Chinese chunk ran into it and busted it up. But the fire is the biggest danger for the pier. I think we had a bad fire. The Parter Hotel burned down. They was afraid the pier was going to burn down too. Very fortunate, but the pier did not catch on fire. In the pre-dawn hours of 1973, the Harbor Restaurant caught fire, and it was pretty hard to put out because the pier is built out of wood, and the posts that hold it in the ocean are soaked in creosote, and the creosote burns really good when a fire hits it. So fire is the big enemy of this here wharf. Over the years, it has been a concern about having fires. The wharfs were of great value until about 1859 when the railroad came to Santa Barbara. Up to then, the wharf was the main way of getting in and out of Santa Barbara, and it was very important. In order to try to survive, they actually built a spur out to the wharf, thinking that would help keep the wharf active. But that did not work out. The railroad pretty well took over the job of bringing stuff to Santa Barbara, and Santa Barbara was no longer isolated from the world. The railroad came through in 1859. The railroad made Santa Barbara part of the rest of the world, and everything was changed forever. Santa Barbara now has become an international city.